Teresa was born in 1515, into a noble but turbulent Spain. The land was filled with the clash of knights and Moors, priests and poets, mystics and reformers. Her father, Don Alonso, was a pious man who read lives of the saints aloud at night. Her mother, Beatriz, loved romance stories and filled Teresa's imagination with knights, castles, and noble quests. When she was 7, Teresa devoured the lives of the saints. Reading about martyrs who died for Christ, she turned to her brother Rodrigo and said, eyes wide with fire, "Let us go to the land of the Moors and be beheaded for Jesus." The two children set out barefoot through the fields, rosaries swinging, whispering prayers of courage. An uncle found them at the city gate and brought them home. Teresa was scolded, but she confessed later that the desire for forever had entered her that day, a thirst for something no toy or story could satisfy. After her mother's early death, Teresa went to a convent school. She was lively, intelligent, full of laughter, and she loved beauty, the perfume of flowers, the sparkle of jewels, the rhythm of conversation. She confessed later, "I began to care too much for pleasing others." Her heart wanted both heaven and admiration. The two pulled her in opposite directions like the strings of a harp. When she was 20, Teresa entered the Carmelite convent of the Incarnation just outside Ávila. The convent housed nearly 140 sisters, kind women, but worldly. Friends came and went freely, gossip and comfort diluted the rule. The young nun found herself drawn to both prayer and chatter, and attention tore her soul in half. Then sickness struck, a violent illness that paralyzed her for years. She lay near death, her body wasted, her spirit heavy. Friends came to comfort her, and priests prayed. She began to read about the Passion of Christ, and one day, her eyes fell upon a small wooden statue of the wounded Christ. "When I looked upon his bleeding hands," she later wrote, "my heart broke. I felt that he had suffered all this for me, and I, in return, had given him so little." That was the moment of her first conversion. She rose from her bed a changed woman, but the old world tugged still, the social visits, the laughter, the easy company. "For nearly 20 years," she confessed, "I lived in that half-heartedness, one foot in the world, one in heaven." Around the age of 40, Teresa experienced what she called her second conversion, the point where the soul stops bargaining with God and surrenders completely. It happened quietly, in front of another statue, this time of the scourged Christ. "When I saw him," she wrote, "I felt my soul melt and could not rise until he had raised me." From that day, her prayer deepened beyond words. She began to experience what mystics call the prayer of quiet, an interior stillness where God speaks not through thought but through presence. She described it with breathtaking simplicity. "It is like water filling a pond. At first you must carry it in buckets, but later it flows in a spring." But this spring terrified her confessors. Some accused her of delusion, others hinted at the devil's work. Ecstasies, levitations, visions, they were dangerous things for a woman in the 1500s. Teresa trembled before the Inquisition's shadow, but her conscience was clear. If this comes from God, it will bear fruit in humility and love. Spain was changing. The Renaissance glimmered in the cities, while the Reformation shook Europe's faith. Teresa looked at her own convent, its comfort, its freedom, and saw that Carmel had forgotten its ancient roots of silence and simplicity. So she dreamed a new house, a small one, where women could live in poverty, enclosure, and prayer, nothing but God. But the idea was scandalous. Her superiors accused her of pride. The city fathers of Ávila called her a troublemaker. Even the sisters who loved her whispered that she had lost her mind. Yet Teresa was immovable. "If this is madness," she said, "then I am content to be mad for God." Finally, with the permission of a few friends and the blessing of a reluctant priest, she founded her first Reformed convent in 1562, the convent of St. Joseph of Ávila. It was tiny, poor, and built on borrowed funds. The sisters wore sandals instead of shoes, hence, discalced Carmelites, and lived by a strict rule of silence and prayer. At first, they endured ridicule and hunger. But peace filled the walls, a joy deeper than comfort. Teresa wrote, We are poor, but we laugh a great deal. She compared her little community to a few strong soldiers in the fortress of God. As Teresa's interior life deepened, she began to experience visions, not dreams, but living encounters. One night, she saw an angel beside her, young, radiant, holding a golden spear tipped with fire. He pierced her heart, and she cried out, consumed by a sweetness beyond pain. She later wrote, "The pain was so sharp that it made me moan, and yet so surpassing was the sweetness of this pain that I could not wish to be rid of it. The soul is content with nothing less than God." That moment, known as the Transfiguration, became famous in art and sculpture, most notably Bernini's Ecstasy of Saint Teresa. But for Teresa, it was not romantic. It was purification, a burning away of self until only love remained. Her confessor at that time was Saint John of the Cross, a quiet, poetic friar who shared her dream of reform. Together they founded new monasteries and friaries across Spain, enduring ridicule, suspicion, and even imprisonment. They saw themselves as gardeners of a new springtime for Carmel, digging wells where God's thirst and man's thirst could meet. In her later years, Teresa gathered her spiritual experiences into writing. She wrote not in polished Latin but in warm, vivid Castilian Spanish, full of wit and realism. Her greatest work, The Interior Castle, describes the soul as a diamond castle with many rooms, each one leading deeper toward the King who dwells at the center. She said, "It is foolish to think we will enter heaven without first entering our own soul. In the outer rooms lie distractions, sins, and self-love. In the inner rooms, humility, peace, and divine intimacy. The final chamber, the seventh mansion, is the soul's spiritual marriage with God, where the will and love of the creature are united perfectly to the Creator." She compared it to two wax candles melting together. The soul and God are no longer two flames but one. Yet the soul remains itself, only filled through and through with the light of God. Teresa's writings astonished theologians. They were not mere emotion, they were maps of grace, guiding countless souls through darkness to light. Her realism made her unique among mystics. She could speak of angels and ecstasies one moment, and of laundry and headaches the next. "God walks even among the pots and pans," she would say with a smile. Teresa's reform, though holy, drew fierce enemies. Some Carmelite friars refused to accept her changes. She was denounced to the Inquisition, letters were forged, her authority questioned. At times she was ordered to stop founding convents, and remain confined. But she never lost her humor or her trust. Once, after her carriage overturned in the mud during one of her journeys, she looked up and said with wry affection, "Lord, if this is how you treat your friends, no wonder you have so few." Her courage was born not of defiance but of faith. "Patience," she told her nuns, "obtains all things." She knew that the soul who endures trial and love grows stronger, like gold in fire. Though she founded 17 convents, Teresa was not a solitary recluse. Her letters reveal a warm, lively woman, witty, practical, and deeply affectionate. She wrote to kings and to bakers, to scholars and to her nieces, with equal tenderness. She called her spiritual daughters "my little doves," and teased priests who took themselves too seriously. To her nuns she wrote, "We must all try to be pleasant to others. There are some people who think holiness consists in a long face. God deliver us from such pious people." She valued joy as a sign of God's presence, and laughter as a form of humility. Her holiness was human, full of balance and grace. In 1582, at the age of 67, Teresa's health began to fail. She was traveling to found yet another convent when fever struck. She reached the town of Alba de Tormes and knew her time had come. Her last words were simple. "At last, my lord, I am a daughter of the Church." Then, looking toward the crucifix, she whispered, "Oh, my lord and my spouse, the hour that I have longed for has come. It is time to meet you." She died peacefully on the night between October 4th and 15th, the very night that Spain changed its calendar from the Julian to the Gregorian, so that she seemed to die and rise in a single breath. After her death, people began to speak of miracles. Her body, when exhumed years later, was found incorrupt, and the scent of flowers filled the air. But her greatest legacy was not her body, it was her fire. She had restored Carmel to its contemplative roots, inspired generations of mystics, and written works that the Church would cherish forever. In 1622 she was canonized, and in 1970 Pope Paul VI named her Doctor of the Church, the first woman ever to receive that title. Her teaching on prayer remains among the clearest in Christian history. If you could ask Teresa what her life meant, she might answer in her own words. The important thing is not to think much, but to love much. And so do what best stirs you to love. Her spirituality can be summed up in 3 words: love, humility, and determination. Love, because all prayer is a response to love himself. Humility, because the soul's greatness is found in knowing its dependence on God. Determination, because holiness requires perseverance through dryness and trial. She often said, "Let nothing disturb you, let nothing frighten you. All things pass away. God never changes. Patience obtains all things. Whoever has God lacks nothing. God alone suffices." Centuries later, pilgrims still come to Ávila to see her convent, her writings, the little cell where she prayed. But her true legacy is invisible, a fire that leaps from soul to soul whenever someone dares to enter the interior castle and meet God face to face. She was, in the end, an ordinary woman who let God do extraordinary things. She laughed, struggled, doubted, and persevered until her will was one with the divine will. As her friend St. John of the Cross wrote of such souls, "In the evening of life, we shall be judged on love alone." And Teresa, that bold, laughing, wounded lover of God, had spent her life preparing for that evening, when the King would open the innermost door and welcome her home.